If the vast majority of disposable wealth in the world is in the hands of 1% of the population, then the market we talk about only reflects the preferences of this one, not the needs of others. The economist Keynes once predicted that by the end of the 20th century, high-level machine automation would replace most meaningless jobs, allowing people to work only 15 hours a week and thus have more free time to pursue their dreams in life. Now, it's the 21st century. Do you think Keynes's prediction has come true? Hello, everyone. In this video, we're going to talk about an extraordinary book, Bullshit Jobs. If you haven't started working yet, I believe this video will be very helpful to you, allowing you to understand in advance what the essence of work really is, and why the world is like a makeshift setup. If you're already working and feeling very anxious and lost about your job, don't worry. We're about to discuss why jobs have become pointless and deceptive. The author David Graeber wrote an article in 2023 called On the Phenomenon of Bullshit Jobs, which caused a sensation worldwide and was translated into over a dozen languages. The reason this article resonated with so many people around the world is that David pointed out something clear. Our modern society's jobs are actually a conspiracy. We all should be familiar with the 80-20th rule, which is a very prominent manifestation in our society, where 80% of the wealth is controlled by 20%, or even fewer people. Essentially, most people are working for these few. If that's the case, then society definitely reflects their will more than ours. Going back to the subject of jobs, we must consider whether work is truly a way for ordinary people to create wealth and become part of the 20, or if it's merely a means to maintain rule and order. We'll talk about this issue in a moment. But first, let's look at some facts. According to a survey by the government agency, 37% of full-time workers in the UK think their job is worthless, and up to 40% are convinced that they are engaged in meaningless work. So, if nearly half of all jobs are pointless and cannot bring value to society, why does our society allow these jobs to exist? What's the real reason behind it? Is it really, as David suggests, a conspiracy? Let's continue discussing this. In fact, most of the predictions Keynes made in the 19th century have now been realized. Our technology has advanced significantly, and our productivity has greatly increased. At the same time, the number of jobs involving repetitive labor in our society has drastically decreased. Ideally, once machines have liberated us from this repetitive labor, we should have more time to do what we want. However, in reality, the pressure of modern work is increasing, and so are the hours of overtime. Then, the author poses a question: our jobs are indeed tiring, but are they meaningful? He asks us to imagine what would happen if everyone in our industry suddenly disappeared one day. What impact would that have on our world? If the world lost its teachers, doctors, repairmen, and cleaners, I think our lives would be severely impacted. Even in our daily lives, if all the YouTubers in the world disappeared, I believe there would be a lot less joy in the world. But what if the jobs that disappeared were salespeople, office clerks, call center workers, government bureaucrats, some corporate managers, and certain staff at banks and insurance companies? Would our lives still be impacted? In fact, many people might even feel that this has a positive effect on their lives, making them better. It's undeniable that many job positions continuously consume social resources without being able to create value, and they can even burden other jobs. For example, if you're stuck in a meaningless job, you might be so busy that you don't have time to cook or bathe your pet yourself. Then you might need to frequently order takeout or take your pet to a grooming service. In this scenario, it actually adds a burden to other job positions. There are many bullshit jobs. And if this situation were in the Soviet era, it might seem normal since the economy was inefficient and the state created many meaningless jobs to achieve full employment. For instance, during the Soviet era, there was a bakery that employed 3 workers for a task that seems absurdly simple. One customer comes in to buy bread, one worker takes the bread out, another slices it, and a third packages it to hand over to the customer. Such a simple task requiring 3 people sounds ludicrous. Ideally, in a market economy, things should be completely different since the market is like an invisible hand that eliminates backward and inefficient companies. So, if a company really has so many meaningless jobs, and all the employees are slacking off or pretending to work hard, as a business owner, would you allow this to happen? I believe the answer is definitely no, because if that were the case, how could you compete with other companies? But the reality is, there are still many bullshit jobs around us. It might be that your job has no meaning at all, wasting time every day, or perhaps, out of your weekly work hours, only about 15 hours are meaningful, and the rest of the time is spent doing pointless things. So, the question we want to ask is, why does this situation continue to occur within a market economy? The first major reason is that during the development of human society, a fourth industry emerged, the information industry. We should all be clear about the traditional three industries: agriculture, manufacturing, and services. With the development of technology, the information industry was born. It's important to note that there is a clear distinction between the information industry and the service industry. The service industry provides intangible products or services to the economy, catering to both businesses and consumers. For example, teachers, waitstaff, doctors, and hairstylists all belong to the tertiary sector. Throughout human development, the number of jobs in the service industry has remained relatively stable. According to the author's research, the global proportion of the service sector has consistently been around 20%. What has been increasing significantly in our society is the number of jobs in the information sector. Essentially, the information industry involves dealing directly with information and data, such as in finance, insurance, real estate, information technology, etc. These types of jobs began to emerge and grow rapidly from the 1950s, especially with the advent of the internet, which led to an explosive increase in information and data. Now, we handle more information and data than ever before. The most significant characteristic of the information industry is that the outcomes of the work are immeasurable. For example, in the first three industries, we can still make some clear quantitative assessments, like how many products you produced today, how many cups of coffee you made, how many patients you saw, and whether the patient's conditions improved. These can all be clearly measured. But it's different with information work. If you spent the day making PowerPoint presentations, writing reports, or organizing documents, how much value did you create today? Your workload and the value you create are not directly linked. Of course, we can't generalize and say that all such jobs are useless. However, in situations where work cannot be quantified, bullshit jobs are more likely to arise. The second reason leading to the proliferation of bullshit jobs, which might surprise many, is the self-expansion of power. Power isn't only held by politicians. Anyone who manages others also possesses some degree of power. Power naturally tends to expand and overflow, which is why we say it's essential to cage power within systems. If we talk about government sectors having many bullshit jobs with low efficiency, people might still understand, but it might be harder to grasp why this happens in private enterprises as well. A significant reason for this phenomenon is the financialization of markets. Looking back at the 19th and early 20th centuries, Western businesses were mostly run by the owners and their family members. At that time, the connection between entrepreneurs and finance wasn't as sophisticated as it is today. The managers were usually the business owners themselves, their family members, and trusted friends. We can see this in Charlie Chaplin's Modern Times, where the capitalist also goes to work every day, just sitting in the office, reading newspapers, and supervising workers through a big screen. Those who have watched Peaky Blinders should know that the Shelby Company was managed by the Shelby family. Their aunt handled the accounts, and the brothers were involved in stirring up trouble, managing casinos, and collecting protection money. To grow and enhance the company's competitiveness and operational capabilities, they relied not on financing or bank loans, but on making alliances with other gangs. Although it wasn't exactly legitimate business, the management and operation models were quite similar. In such a context, it was not easy for bullshit jobs to arise. Because the boss was personally in charge, it was unlikely for such situations to occur. So, when did the problem start? It emerged in the 1970s. Why the 1970s? Because that's when Apple, Microsoft, Intel, and Oracle were founded, followed by companies like Dell, Cisco, and Adobe. It feels like that era was precisely when the internet began to emerge. Entrepreneurs back then didn't have much money and urgently needed external financing. From that era, the venture capital industry began to grow and flourish. Financial capital and Wall Street started to control these large companies. Since then, the owners of production means and managers began to truly separate, and the system of professional managers gradually established and perfected. Essentially, the people managing the companies and the owners became different groups. A CEO might just be another employee, with various executives who might be working with you this year and gone to another company the next. So, in such situations, it's difficult for these managers to genuinely consider the company's long-term development. They might only be concerned about whether they perform well during their tenure, whether their salary is high enough, or if they can enjoy better benefits. Thus, in these circumstances, the expansion of power is very likely. For example, as soon as someone attains a managerial position, they might hire 5 or 6 completely unnecessary administrative staff to serve them, then rack their brains to figure out what work to assign them. When reporting to their superiors, they don't worry about not being able to explain because, as we mentioned regarding the information industry, the results of their work are hard to measure. So, if you are a boss, you might not be fully aware of the challenges your subordinates face. When they tell you they need more staff and provide some reasons, you might think their arguments sound quite reasonable. Similarly, your subordinates might also seek additional staff based on the same reasons. As a result, bullshit jobs are created layer by layer. Therefore, there is a very close connection between the financialization of markets, the boom in the information industry, and the proliferation of bullshit jobs. But these reasons alone are not enough. According to the author, one reason for the many bullshit jobs is that some of them are quite lucrative, even more so than jobs where people work earnestly. The American institutional economist Douglas North once introduced the concepts of productive and redistributive efforts. Productive effort is any effort that creates value and wealth for society, whether through innovation or non-innovative labor. As long as you increase the total wealth of society, you are engaging in productive effort. Redistributive effort, however, does not increase the total wealth of society. It does not value human labor, but aims to carve out as large a slice as possible from the societal wealth pie. Essentially, redistributive efforts do not create value, but legally plunder value from others. To help us understand better, the author cites a case in the UK involving asbestos damage compensation. In this case, law firms engaged in legal plundering because the case required government grants amounting to hundreds of millions of pounds for compensation. When the law firms took over the case, they focused on how to make more money since their fees came from the compensation fund. Hence, they had no incentive to resolve the compensation issue efficiently. The longer the case dragged on, the more they earned. They deliberately arranged offices in different cities, forcing people to travel back and forth between cities. For example, they would print the same document repeatedly, only to discard it after printing, performing this process 5 or 6 times to purposely reduce efficiency and delay the victims from receiving compensation. This situation is also common in the banking, insurance, and other service management industries. However, not all companies and professionals in these fields operate this way. But in industries dealing with information and documents, it's very easy for bullshit jobs to proliferate and for the people in these jobs to divide up the wealth created by a company. More outrageously, the actual value-creating groups within a company may not receive the compensation they deserve. As the author mentions in the book, from around 1945 to 1975, there was an unspoken agreement between workers, employers, and the government that if a factory's productivity and profits increased, so should the wages and rewards for the workers. However, in the 1970s, productivity and compensation began to diverge. While productivity soared, Workers' wages barely changed. Now, the question arises, where did the extra money go? The author interviewed a French tea factory that was performing very well and was acquired by Unilever in the last century. Initially, Unilever did not interfere much and granted a lot of autonomy. The factory workers were motivated because an increase in the factory's profits meant an increase in their wages and rewards. They were enthusiastic and even introduced a series of improvements which significantly boosted the factory's profits. But later, the situation changed. A worker showing the author around said, "The company's profits increased, but did they raise our wages? No. Did they hire more workers, bring in new machinery, or expand production? No. What did they do? They started to bring in more and more white-collar workers. Initially, our factory only had 2 white-collar employees, the boss and the HR manager. But then suddenly, there were 3, 4, 5, 7 white-collar workers walking around in suits, carrying notebooks, not sure what they were recording. Then they would hold meetings to discuss what was written in those notebooks, followed by writing reports. But the workers' wages remained unchanged." From these examples, it's clear that the profits generated by business growth actually went into the pockets of those dealing with information management, administration, and data. So the author proposes a bold conclusion at this point. We are essentially in a feudal-style work environment. How can a market economy be linked to feudal management? Let's see how the author explains this. He argues that if there are so many bullshit jobs, or if people only spend about 15 hours a week on effective work, then why not give people more rest time, like 3 or 4 days off a week, or even 5 months off a year? The author believes it's because the function of modern work has gone beyond simply boosting productivity. It's also about maintaining the existing order and established power relationships. Essentially, it's about not letting you have too much freedom. Modern managers are very much like the kings and lords of old. In feudal times, the real producers were the peasants and craftsmen. Above them, the nobility engaged primarily in redistributive efforts, legally extracting vast wealth from the workers through taxes and tributes, then creating jobs like retainers, followers, and jesters to protect and highlight their noble status, and giving these people a bit more money. The real value creators, the laborers, were the ones being exploited. Isn't it the same with modern managers? They create positions like assistants, secretaries, telemarketers, and PR consultants to cement their status, while the real value creators might be the ones earning the least. And all this is to maintain the current order. If people had too much free time, they might do more of what they want, question the fairness of the entire work and social distribution system, and try to break the rules. This reminds me of George Orwell's 1984, where work is often monotonous, repetitive, and exhausting, leaving people with little energy to think or question their circumstances, tied to their jobs and worried about losing them. This maintains the existing order and the game continues. Nowadays, this even leads to massive overcompetition, as people continuously validate and join this game, relentlessly studying for exams to improve their resumes, so they can apply for more respectable jobs, without time to ponder whether this game is reasonable at all. What is involvement? It means no additional value is created, but the energy and cost we invest increase. This is the redistributive effort we just discussed. This video aims to discuss why work has become more bullshit and deceptive. There was a popular topic before, called, "The world is a makeshift stage." Many people, when they first enter society, think they must strive hard, surrounded by very capable and responsible colleagues. But when they actually get to their jobs, they find many people are just skating by or slacking off. After watching this video, I believe we all will have a more rational and objective view of work itself. The author begins this book with a dedication to everyone who wants to genuinely work, create value for themselves, and contribute to society. If you are someone who wants to genuinely work and create value, I believe this video will inspire you. Although we may not be able to change society, maybe we can find ways to change ourselves. If you find this video from Woody meaningful, please do give it a big like and follow, which is very important to me. I'm the new YouTuber Pink Woody, who loves to share knowledge and stories. And I'm glad you've made it this far. Let's add a milestone to our reading journey, and I'll see you in the next video.